I'm thrilled to introduce our panel for this discussion, led by Greg Goff. Greg is the Principal of Customer Strategy and MarTech Enablement at Credera. They were making fun of me backstage because these are long titles, people. Greg, welcome to the stage. Thanks for being out here. Yes, you can have a seat here. Yes. And joining him is Stephen Romney. Stephen is the Associate Global Vice President of Engineering, Capabilities, and Platforms at Eli Lilly. Or he corrected me and said, Jody, I'm part of Team Epic. Like, when I say I'm part of Team Epic, doesn't everyone want to come work for Team Epic? I'm like, yeah, we do. Yeah. Thanks for being here. So in this session, Greg and Stephen will dive deep into the world of data and marketing. And they're going to be unraveling the complexities of building a scalable omnichannel data framework that can drive global marketing success. So welcome, gentlemen. Take it away.
Thank you so much. So Steve, let's set the stage. How would you describe to the audience the Scalable Omnichannel Data Framework at Lilly?
Yeah, so we like big words, right? Especially when we talk about data. And before I get to omnichannel, and I don't know how it is for the rest of you, but I don't always know the channels that our marketing teams want to pick. Right, think about what are you going to execute in today, tomorrow, the next day? We've got a good idea what some of them are. And so we actually start with the customer first, right? How do we start with the customer at the center, and that brings you back into ID spine. Think about how I'm making sure I have that. We talked a bit this morning about things like permission architecture and how are we making sure that that's set up. So not only can I see who they are, I know that who really well, I know the circumstance in which I can execute with them. And then what are the data structures that I need to inform all of the pieces that we're going to be executing through. When you think about Omni, I think we have to think of modern execution today. We're obviously here with Telium talking about real time, but we also have to connect into some spaces and places where we may not have that hand raiser bias, right? Where we can see what that customer is trying to do in real time, and that's where we have to get into NBA, NBE, right? And so as we think about that, the way we're trying to work our data models, it's not only what's the structure, what's the speed at which they can operate, how do we make sure we can inform multiple different locations within our architecture so that we can use it the way it's intended?
It's an impressive capability. When you think about an epic story or an epic journey, right, there's always a series of challenges, right, for the hero and their team to surmount. What have been some of the primary challenges that your team has faced building out the data framework?
Yeah, and so when Eli Lilly started its journey, and I don't know if other companies were in a similar spot, but once upon a time, most of our consumer data was not inside our walls, right? So a couple of years ago, we were not in the cloud. We were in a teaser appliance box, and our data sat with our agency partners, right? We said, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could do some analytics ourselves? And we didn't have our data. And so the first challenge was literally we didn't have any in the building. And as we started to take a look at that, you get into use cases, and how are we going to decide how much can you spend? I don't know if anybody's ever had the chance. I know DirecTV has. We come in and say, I need to go ask for money because I need to go build out a technical infrastructure that not everybody really understands what it can do and should do. And most of the time when you go talk to your leadership team, it's hard to get money for technical architecture, right? It's not the easiest thing to do. Especially when you come in and say, what I really like to do is operate your business entirely differently than you are today. I want to modernize you, right? And that was kind of where we started. We started in that aspect of where do you pick a place where you can start? It's kind of how to eat the elephant. And we started first by just trying to bring our data within our walls, and then you get to what data is really important. What's going to make that business case? And we started with basics. Where does our customer data exist? You start to go into that idea of one, categorize it. What are the logs? What's everything we know exists? And how do we go start getting it? In some cases, we had to change contracting. You think about the way in which your data exists with your suppliers. I don't know how many of you have clauses in your contracts right now on things like artificial intelligence, how data can be used in and out of your ecosystems. And that's the part where it's continuously getting harder for all of us. It's not only can we get a hold of it, do we understand how it's being used? And then are we configuring to the way our external environment's changing, right? We've talked a bit here and there about privacy and permission, and we're in a new and growing system right now on privacy and permission globally. And so your standards have to evolve in that complexity. And that's part of where we say challenges, I think they're evergreen. I don't think they go away. So it starts out with how do I get money to do the things we need to do? We didn't have a team. So we started out saying, hey, if you want to get some data, it's great. But we need people. And that balance of internal, external, I think every company has a different version of what that looks like. But we need folks that, my analogy is fingers on keyboards. You don't need a bunch of executives talking. We need people that are in platform, programming, transforming, connecting, and who can not only articulate and execute, but they have to be able to understand when we translate to our business users who are a bit removed, right? How do you simplify the concepts that we're talking about in a way that everybody can understand, right? And that you can transform into that use case that can unlock value for the corporation.
Very good. Let's go back to the beginning. You mentioned the fundraising part. How did you gain stakeholder buy-in? And what were a few of the groups you needed to win over first?
Yeah. So I think all of us have heard a story that sounds something like you have to start with use cases in mind, right? Any good build out you're going to do, what are the 3 to 5 use cases I'm going to start with? I think one of the things we try to do is set a really hard goal. When you think about the concept of speed to value, what's the fastest you can deliver something that the organization can see as a tangible benefit, right? So keep it really simple, saying, how long will it take you? And you said, can I do it in 6 months? Can I do it in 3 months? And if you're able to get that first win, right, pick the easiest, most low-hanging fruit you can find, that gives you something that you can then start to share and evangelize a bit, right? You can say, we've been able to start to deliver value, and then you start to change, and you think about that push-pull sequence, right? It starts out at a pull with most companies. We're trying to get assets and resources to transform the way we operate. And when you're able to show your business stakeholders that you're delivering value very quickly, then it starts to become a pull. They're like, well, can I get more? Can you do it faster? What do you need to make that happen? Because you start to become a self-funding prophecy, right? You're able to demonstrate results in a way that transforms. And then it's less of a question on a benefit risk and more about where's the company strategically focusing, right? And that's part of that conversation is really important. I think that's one of the things we got right early. We had business stakeholders who understood that and challenged us, and we were able to demonstrate it very quick for a lower scale investment to unlock the larger one that we needed. And so it's a way to kind of balance risk mitigation and give teams permission to start.
Very good. So you've got the vision broken down into use cases. You've got at least the seed money, right, yes, to go get and start and kind of build out an MVP and scale from there. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about the arc of time, the time frame it takes to kind of move from the vision through resourcing, through MVP, through scaling?
Yep. So, when we take about, let's get, say, vision to first use case, we try to get those done within 90 days if we can, right? And everybody says, wow, is that possible? Now, most of the time, it's not possible if you are looking for perfection, right? And that's what I try to remind everybody. Like, the analogy is 3 legs of the stool, right? I can have speed, quality, and cost. You got to pick 2, right? It's hard to get all 3. And so if you're looking at really quick value generation, and can we show that we can get it to work in a simplified MVP, I think we can usually do that very quick, 3 to 6 months, depending on the project we're taking a look at. Now, the hard part is scale is where you bring in operations. And I think that's the thing where we're continuing to, I would say, learn and grow and experience. Eli Lilly and Company right now today, we're really fortunate. We've got a lot of brands that are either already launched and successful or launching. And so it's not just changing a business analytics organization. It's not changing an IT organization. It's also changing brand teams for multiple brands. Because the way in which you think about it, we've been talking about this, it's how do you focus on customer journeys? How do you think differently about the way you see your customers and your opportunities as opposed to channel marketing? For a long time, we've sort of conditioned everybody to be channel marketers. How much should I spend in linear? How much should I spend in OTT? Right? And so we're good at that. We think about that really well. Mm-hmm. And part of what we're doing now is to say, how do we actually see the customer, see the journey, understand where they are? What are those high value actions that you can transform in real time and actually start to move them to a better state where they're more likely to receive the outcome, whatever your product or brand is that you're trying to achieve. And I think that's part of what we've seen. That scale part, I'd say we're still working through, and how do we get better at that? But I think we've been able to get to scale on some of our measurement capabilities in less than 2 years. Scale for us would be to say we've deployed systems across all of our brands. So from time to first use, 90 to 120 days, scale across the portfolio, less than 2 years, right? And that's adoption all the way through, depending on the capability group.
It's a great segue into measuring success, Steve. How has Lilly measured and proven out the ROI of the Scalable Data Framework?
Yeah, so as you think about it, one of the things, we try to continue to show value. Now, value is not always, we're kind of all conditioned to ROAS, right? What am I getting a return on sales, return on investment? And the first place we try to start showing value is, did the intended behavior change happen? Can we show you that the customer made a choice that was different? And if we see that, is that a good leading metric? Do we have any evidence that would show, are those actions predictive of that ROAS happening later? Right? Because a lot of times the first thing you'd say, let's say if you're looking at the top of your web domains, and we say we've got lots of traffic, but we're not getting them into lower funnel conversion. Right? So the first part you have to say is, I've got to start to work them down a bit. And how do I start to show some of that benefit? So I think part of what we start at is, do you have a KPI framework? Do you have a KPI framework that is predictive? We've been able to make some really good headway. One of the things you'll notice is, pharma, it's hard because we don't necessarily have a shopping cart. Right? If you come to our websites, it's not like you're going to go click, put your Visa card in, and buy something. Right? You usually go to your doctor, you go to somewhere else. So our data science team had to help quite a bit because we had to work on how do we translate those lead metrics and those KPIs into predictive lead metrics that we can then execute within platform and start to transform. So I think that's your first part, predictive lead metrics. And the second piece we do is, whether it's on personalization, whether it's on marketing mix models, we take a look at a value story. If I asked a question of the group, I'll pick marketing mix models for a second because we haven't talked about those. And if I just said show of hands, how many folks use a marketing mix model in the way that they execute? Some. How many have them internal, where you're not using an agency to build them for you? Right? A lot less hands, right? Some, but a lot less. And so you'd say, how much is it costing you to operate a marketing mix model external? Right? Where if your data structure is built in the way you've transformed, now I can take the cost of what that would normally do, I can apply those resources differently, and I can then start to transform the next group of work we have. Right? And not only that, I've started to build capabilities that as we have data coming in and coming out of the environments, we can run them faster, start to deploy more advanced capabilities. Same thing is true on personalization. Right? So as we think about that opportunity, saying, hey, we need multiple different ways to measure and show success, right? Part of it's on ROI or value savings. Part of it's also showing that change in engagement, right? And so it's KPIs, as I think we all know, and then it's finding ways to show either cost decrease or performance on revenue eventually.
Steve, can you share any high-level initial results with the audience, either by like a brand or by a channel or by a use case?
Yeah, so some kind of easy high-level metrics. I think you've seen, I think the 3M examples were great examples. I think as we've taken a look at some of our first use cases on deploying real-time personalization, right? And that's saying, hey, once I see a customer coming back to our websites, do I have an idea what they're looking for? The general goal we choose, I'm trying to get us at least 20% better from 2, right? Before we personalization until after we did it. Our first group of use cases were better than 40. Right. So when you say, like, are we seeing that transformation? We are. And as we try to take a look at that, our goal is to get around 20. If we do that, that kind of works for everybody, and that's a good standard. It also means we're not always going to work, right? Some of the use cases we deploy, we're not going to see them clearly when they get them into platform. They don't always work exactly the way you think they will. And so sometimes you get a failure, right? I think the ability to learn really quickly and then iterate and transform is also part of that equation. So like I said in the beginning, we picked a couple that we knew we couldn't miss on to get started. That's helping us transform that story that's cycling around the company. Part of what we do to help evangelize that is create a 60-second short. Right? Let me take you in and show you exactly what we're doing and then show you the results. So you can get an experience when we say personalization, what do we mean? What's the transformation? What's it look like? And then what are the results? And then that goes out broadly so that we have teams that we can start influencing. And all of a sudden they go, well, that's really interesting. I think I have an idea. Can we work with you? Absolutely.
So looking forward, right, as you continue to scale out the data framework at Lilly, how will advancements in AI, machine learning, marketing automation, How will that factor into the capabilities that your team has built?
Yeah, I think the first place we are right now, I think almost all of us have some form of AI or Gen AI in some stage of deployment right now. I think the early pieces we're focusing on right now, it's more on how do we get more efficient. One of the biggest barriers we have right now is just workforce. Do we have enough people to execute all the opportunities that we have? And the answer right now is nope. Right? And so one of the things we're taking a look as you think about some of the early good use cases of AI. Think about some of the work we're doing in coding. Think of the work that we're doing in things like data documentation. And a lot of those advancements we're trying to deploy in real time. Because even if we can get all of our folks that are doing SQL queries, Python, if you get them 20% more efficient, right? All of a sudden, that unlocks 20% of capacity that you could deploy towards the next use case. So I think that's the first one, saying how do we get more efficient so we can work on projects that we know are going to unlock more value. As we then start to look, and we're fortunate, we've got an internal data science organization as well. And a lot of what we've been focusing on is when you get into ML ops, right? How can we start to deploy not only AI, but Gen AI? Think about things like metadata, right? Let's take a look whether it's identity, whether it's on the way you're doing content and content classification. I don't know how many of you have like amazing teams that everything's perfect on your metadata structures, whether it's tagging, taxonomy, kind of all of those pieces. So we're looking to say, where are the opportunities that we can get that data to be cleaner, easier to use, that we can do it more rapidly and be less people dependent, right? The more we can do that, we then are transforming some of the opportunities we have in the deeper levels of analysis we can get to. And how do we deploy that within systems? So it just becomes how we run the business. And I think those are a couple of examples. We have more, but those are two easy ones.
Great, great. Coming back to full circle to use cases. Yeah. Looking ahead, what new patient-centric or HCP-focused use cases are top of mind?
Yeah, and so if you're not really close to pharma, maybe, and I know we have a good group of diverse industries here, we're like 3 customer groups mixed into one, right? So we're 2 essentially business-to-business organizations, and then a B2C organization. So the stuff you see in all of your devices, consumer media, we do quite a bit of that. All pharma companies do. But we also have a direct business to doctors. So we think about that B2B to doctor side, but also to payer organizations, right? You think about plan and benefit designers. And so when we think about where are our opportunities, one of the questions that we'd ask and say just really simple ones on use cases, and I think this is an opportunity as we're all together. You'd say, what's a good real-time use case? Right? Real-time data is like, oh my gosh, we're really excited, but what are the use cases, right? What do they start to look like? And I start going back to simple things. Where are the places that I know our customers are stuck? And so whenever we can see a need in the marketplace that a customer is looking for, right? You have an event in the market. And that event, we had one yesterday, I'll use the example. If you're reading the press for Eli Lilly yesterday, we had some great news for Alzheimer's, right? And that the FDA advisory committee voted unanimously. And so there are customers, where they're in those 3 groups, that all took a behavior because of that announcement, right? And so the first part is saying, well, I know they did that. How do I take advantage of that across those 3 customer groups so that they get what they're looking for faster? Because we know they're looking for things in real time, right? And so we start with those examples and say, okay, as I think about that opportunity, as we see those needs in our business, do we understand what those are, right? Whether that's on our owned and operated properties, whether that's as a result of what we're seeing in social media, press releases, and if we're seeing them really clearly, are we set up to action on them? And I think that's where some of our opportunities are. It's if you think about not just the work you're doing in paid, right? But as you think about most of the way our customers are interacting, and this is part of where, I think part of the discussion today has been, how do you get outside of just your consumer walls? And I think we're believers in that. It's how do you see your whole customer and do so in a way that you can transform? And that's part of where we're trying to see the opportunity, and how do we help enable that? I think the second one that I would give is, if you think about just those real-time moments that are things that happen in market that you want to react to. The other one, which I think for us is a great opportunity, is the way we answer questions. All of us, whether you're thinking, if you've ever picked up a service layer, right, just keep it easy. The first thing you'd want to do is say, well, I'd really like a chatbot to answer all those questions, right? A lot of times the challenge is that our data models aren't good enough to inform that chatbot in a way that actually makes that user experience a good one. So how do we continue to work on those? What are our opportunities to transform, whether that's integrating your call center data into the way we're running our CDPs, whether that is saying, like, am I even capturing enough of the data I need? Do I even have the right record retention to be able to identify what are those questions and be able to serve those in real time? Because that's where, if you start at the root of the questions your customers have, that hand raiser bias, data scientists don't always love that. I love that in activation because we can see that clearly. And let's take advantage of those.
Great. So thinking about those potential top-of-mind future use cases and how your data framework is going to have to evolve and adapt. Right? I heard real time. I heard integration with additional channels. Anything else come to mind in terms of how you think the data framework will adapt between, say, now and 18, 24 months down the road?
So I think maybe two things that evolve. I'm going to take us a little away from data frameworks. I think there's two other pieces which I don't think that we've necessarily hit. The way that you design your architecture is really important. And I'll use the example of the way you set up your NBA, NBE ecosystems and real time, and deciding, how do I set up the logic framework between which one should be, sort of the words I'll use are, in charge, and which one should yield. And that conversation, depending on who you're talking to, is not always a clean one. So think about that idea of, if I see something in real time, I probably want to take advantage of that. But I've done all this other work trying to anticipate that customer need with sequential modeling. And so is my architecture set up that I can do that without having a Christmas tree of business rules trying to solve for it? Because I got to sustain and maintain those if I do it that way, right? And how do I make sure I don't slow it down? I want to put that latency in. The other piece, as we think about data framework, I think one of the things that we're also focusing on is, do we have the right talent? When we think about the way in which our teams are evolving, I'm standing up here representing part of my teams over here in the corner. They're amazing. But we've been continuing to look to say, what are the kinds of talent we need to anticipate the change that we have? You kind of a new term emerging, right? A little bit of marketing, but privacy engineering, right? We think about what that looks like. When you think about, we talked about RAG models earlier today. If I took a quiz on what's a RAG model, do you know how they're structured? Do you know how they're going to help us? It's new. A lot of us aren't really up to speed yet on it. I was reading about it 2 weeks ago, right? So I'm not like I'm an expert in data science, but it's to say, how are we kind of continuing to transform the way in which our talent base is set up? And how's that talent base continually evolving? Because it's not just technical talent, right? It's all the data on the way our systems are evolving is kind of the same. We have a group of technical folks that are amazing. We have another group, which is much larger, that are generally lower skilled, that are spread across everybody's organizations. And those are the folks that we're convincing, right? And so we kind of have to wear a couple of different badges. It's not only the ability to go into platform, transform, and build, but it's also the integration layer to transform the OCM of our other stakeholders around us to enable us to transform, right? Because a lot of times we don't always get to make all the decisions. We need some help. And so I look at those as two different perspectives.
When you think of the team dimension, right, Steve, it's almost like you're the player coach on a large, diverse team.
Yep.
What are some of the attributes of what you would consider to be like the most valuable players on your team? Like, you think about the audience here and the type of experiences and skills that we should all bring to the table. What's an MVP baseball trading card look like?
Great question. So I am super fortunate. I've got folks that either report directly to me or support my team all over the world, right? So you think about post-COVID ecosystem, saying, like, does everybody come into Eli Lilly every day for work? The answer is no, right? We're all over the place. So the first part is, if you are able to, don't let geography be a barrier, right? So you think about sort of that go where the talent is and build them into the way you do your business. What we're generally looking for, and if you looked at the background of my team, you'll see everything from folks with PhDs in engineering and data science to folks that have degrees that are undergraduate and things that aren't related to data at all. And so you're like, well, how do you get them? What are you doing, right? Because we're all learning. We're looking for folks that have an appetite to learn, that they're willing to get into platforms and consume themselves, right? Because a lot of what we're doing today, there's not necessarily a college course for, right? Because it's a multiple skill set domain that we're all upskilling in at the same time. So it's that hunger to learn. It's, are you willing to go in and do it yourself? Do you have intellectual curiosity that you're willing to go try to solve problems? And also be able to anticipate, right? I think one of the things we spent a lot of time talking about, Lilly's been around for a long time, so there's parts of our architecture and engineering that were designed more than 10 years ago. There's parts that were designed in the last couple of months. So you're always going to have that state of where I've got things that are new and old. And I think part of the mindset we're trying to get into is how do you start to design knowing that you have to change, right? And so that constant state of change and being evergreen, I think, is hard to do at the same time as we're asking for master data and validated systems that I can run operations on and be able to not fail, right? That's kind of an interesting piece. I'll give an example of just a framework. If you've been following one of the big places we're in right now is weight loss. And if you follow the trends on like how big a topic is weight loss in general, there are times where the amount of people searching for content and information on the weight loss market is larger than when Taylor Swift announces she's going to do something in a concert, right? Just to give you a framework, right? So to get to the size and scale that you have to sort of think through, we see really big peaks. And so it's that idea of how do you make sure everything's going to work on time when it should.
Great. Steve, I want to thank you and the Lilly team for sharing your challenges and your successes with the audience today. And I also want to say special thanks to our team host today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Greg and Steven.